So my name is Evelyn Chick. I'm a hospitality and beverage expert. I am the owner of Ahma, which is the event space I'm in right now, Simpl Things, a cocktail bar around the corner, and Love of Cocktails, which is a cocktail kit and experience company. So how I started in the hospitality industry was actually probably rooted at a very young age. So I grew up in Hong Kong. My dad and my grandfather always had their hands in the restaurant business. My grandfather still owns a seafood restaurant. And I was always running around in the kitchens and trying to host parties at home. And I've worked every position you can ever think of, from host to bartender to fine dining manager. And blink of an eye, 17 years later, I own a few of my businesses, but I think it's always rooted in the want to curate really unique experiences for people. I first got into the cocktail scene kind of accidentally. I was working at a high volume space, and then I was hired at a cocktail bar, or actually a wine bar, and I had just won a trip to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And I didn't know much before that, but after that trip, I was just in awe about the passion and the history that goes into a singular spirit. So I think I was in my very early 20s then, and I really was interested in just everything that surrounded that spirit. So I decided to put myself through the Certified Specialist of Spirit course, which was available to me then. And from there, the love of cocktails kind of like sprung, and I read a lot of books. I entered a lot of competitions, and that's kind of how it started. To be honest, like before the pandemic, I thought I was at my all-time high. So I did most of my hospitality experience in my early 20s in Vancouver, and I won a global cocktail competition as soon as I moved to Toronto, which is about 9 years ago now. Very crazy to think of. But the pandemic really hit a lot of people. And before we shut down, I was a beverage director for a massive hospitality company. So I was 16 venues, did a ton of beverage design, and consulted a lot. And obviously no venues were available and or open during the pandemic. So I decided that I'm going to use my skill set. Instead of like baking sourdough bread, I would go and just use my consultancy and my knowledge of the industry and the knowledge of cocktails to open pretty much a blog. Like I started a blog, and from there, a lot of folks actually asked if I could teach them how to make cocktails online. So I jumped on Chef's Feed and did virtual cocktail classes there. Eventually, that kind of spiraled into this crazy demand of people wanting me to educate them on things that I've been working on for the last however many years in my life. So I started Evelyn Chick Projects, which is a consultancy that helps with, connecting people through virtual experiences. And once they realized that that was a possibility, I started Love of Cocktails, which is the cocktail kit company that actually like delivers the physical product to them. So opening a business to me was like a very accidental thing, but also it came out of necessity, because I didn't know how to deliver those experiences to guests when there were no front-facing venue to do so. So I kind of hate that word pivoted, but I kind of just like pivoted and figured out a way to do the same thing, but in a completely different realm. I would say the biggest struggle is not understanding the limitations that I've set myself, which is such an interesting answer, because once you leap into business, a lot of people are worried about capital, about, physically, what do you do? Financially, what do you do? But at that time, it was all virtual. So I was providing an experience and a service that I could do right from my house. And when I continued on the journey of building Love of Cocktails with the cocktail kit portion of it, I really was already in business for a little bit, but I didn't understand the logistics that it took to really build something that is in an e-commerce space, which I've never approached before, but I also didn't understand that I could do it with a lot of research and a lot of mistakes learned and a lot of depending on others who I've trusted before. So I think the biggest hurdle is really myself. And I know that if I keep pushing and I keep learning and understanding what my cushion is and what my safety net is, and never really stop and look back and all you can go is upwards, then I think I would have had a lot more success in the first 6 months, but I eventually learned that. So it helped me build enough capital to open my brick and mortar spaces now. I think a big part of it is like finding support around you, because you can't do everything on your own, and you just have to know that. Motivation comes from a very internal space. You almost have to, like, when you're a business owner and you're an entrepreneur, no one's going to push you to do what you need to do. So it comes from a space where you almost have to like sit and give yourself pep talks every day, and just to say, hey, no matter what, you need to push through, because otherwise it just won't exist. Whether or not you have support of people, which is such an important part of building a business, you still have to be the one who's putting a fire under your butt and lighting the fire under others and motivating them to do so. So I guess my motivation comes from the necessity to motivate my team to do things, and in turn, I need to do that work on my own first. I'm not very good at self-care, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not very good at self-care. However, I think the biggest piece is always consistency on something that is a non-negotiable. So I always try to go to the gym at like 6:30 in the morning. That's like my non-negotiable. It sets my day up, even if I absolutely hate it and I have to drag myself to go. I know that that's going to give me the burst of energy that I need for the rest of the day. Even if, say, like a printer exploded, like I'm able to go through and do that monotonous task because I know that I've exerted my energy in a positive way. Another one is I love like having a glass of wine and putting Food Network on. That's like one of the things that's just brainless in the back, even if I'm doing expenses. It's like not really resting, but that's my way of decompressing and knowing that I've gotten some work out of the way, but still have enjoyment in my own way outside of that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs will say the same thing, is that I don't actually know what I do every day. Like genuine, you're like, what does your day-to-day look like? It's just pure chaos. Like it's chaos every day. You're constantly making informative decisions to make sure that your businesses go through. So I think the aha moment was when I was sending out like my 1,000th kit or something with like 3 people working for me. I knew at that moment that I couldn't not get up and just do it, because now I'm responsible not only for the staff that I have acquired from having no job during the pandemic. I've now given them sort of like a livelihood, which is amazing. I'm able to do that, but I'm now also liable for the 1,000 guests who are receiving this particular product. And I always find that when there's an attention to service involved, that's when I'm constantly like, this is where I have to do it, because that can't fail. You got to roll the punches. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned too, like during the pandemic, things just get thrown at you nonstop, everywhere, constantly. So if you're not adaptable and you're not, I guess, humble enough to like change what the ideology of something you wanted to create is in the beginning, that hurdle is a lot harder to get through. So you need to be flexible, adaptable, all that stuff. And I feel like if it weren't for the pandemic, I'm generally pretty stuck in my ways. That wouldn't have taught me how to build so many different aspects of my businesses. Yeah, so Evelyn Chick project started in 2020, and then it kind of grew to a point where I needed a space, and I was hoping that events were going to eventually start happening, because obviously people really enjoy the cocktail experiences that I did for them virtually. So I was set out to actually find a production space for Love of Cocktails, because I couldn't do it out of the restaurant that I was doing it out of anymore, because they were ready to open. So I was like, well, I need a space to continue this business. So I actually set out to find something that is a pure production space. And I was going to apply for a liquor license and stuff. And Ahma, I found in August of 2021. And I was like, this is perfect. And you know what? It could be made into an event space as well. So I actually like did all the renos here on my own with my team. And at that point, I was really lucky to have a very solid team to go through that craziness with me. So that was 2021. And that was all during the like opening, shutdown, the 3 or 4 times that we experienced it. So yeah, in essence, my core businesses started during the pandemic. At the time of opening Ahma, everyone was questioning why I didn't want to open a restaurant space because it's so gorgeous in here. But I saw that people were eating and drinking differently, and there was a gap in curating experiences that wasn't full service. Everyone always found a space, and then they had to hire an events coordinator, and then they had to hire somebody else to do the design and someone else to do the drinks and the food. And for me, I had experiences in all of those avenues because I've also ran a ton of conferences and done a crazy amount of events. So I think I wanted to keep this a very unique and special, intimate space for people to come create their own memories. So what I'm most excited about is continue doing that for people. Like just this past weekend, we had an engagement party, and then before that we had a corporate meeting, and before that we had a baptism like after party, and then a 40th birthday. Like there's just so many different memories that people create here that's so uniquely their own. So that's what I'm excited about in this space. We do our cocktail classes a couple times a month, and it's very popular. They usually sell out, which is fantastic. But those are kind of the core of how we started Love of Cocktails. So I do a couple times a month, keep it pretty exclusive, but it's always a really fun experience. It's open to the public, so people can do like date night, friends night. We've had a bachelor party come through, do one. So again, it's like creating a pretty unique experience just for people, but in a field that I'm very familiar with. I really didn't want to buy a restaurant. I didn't want to buy a restaurant. I was like, this is such a crazy field to be in right now, especially with the closures and everything we've seen during the pandemic. But I was actually looking for a larger event space to kind of move my operations into, or even just to have outside of Ahma, because we keep getting a lot of requests for bigger events. And Simpl Things came along as like a strange like hush-hush deal from the owners before, and I walked into the space and I had such a clear vision as to what I wanted it to be, because from the pandemic there was just a lot of like not so great memories of, you know, a restaurant formula that used to be that didn't work anymore, because again, people are eating and drinking differently. So I thought about this crazy all day split concept cocktail bar that really works as a collection of individuals who all just want to make things better, and two chefs who all own their particular dynamic space, so their own kitchen business, and me running the front of house operations for it. Everyone is just playing to their own strengths. So it's almost like, someone told me this analogy the other day. They're like, it's almost like a barber renting a chair in a salon. Like you do what you do best, and you're going to execute that with the tools and the teams that you find best for that particular avenue. So Simpl Things came along, and we opened it in the span of like 3 months. It was a really whirlwind of an opening, and I still can't believe it's been a year already. But it seems like people do really enjoy that space, and people love the experiences there. So I think I'm building something good. I just wanted to build a space that's like the polar opposite of the event space, and something that like really elicits like happiness, like tons of color. And I always say you can't not be happy in there. Like there's just too much like fun, cute things, you know? Yeah, so I was in UBC. I did visual arts as my major. So I was always like building random stuff, like sculptures and random like paintings that would like pop out of things. And I used mixed medium, and it was always a very, very visual person. But I was always interested in like architecture and design. That just wasn't my specialty at the time. But it definitely helped with the eye of looking at what can potentially look good in this space. It also comes from a lot of experience though, you know, like having operated restaurants for 17 years, the like 1 inch you need behind the bar, or like 3 inches you need near the server station, or even like putting another water faucet somewhere, is just, I guess, like my insanity about attention to detail. So it's definitely a learned skill. Honestly, like a lot of women that I talk to, and a lot of successful women who have done a lot of things, and who've done a lot that they should be very proud of, all say the same thing: I have imposter syndrome. And I say this all the time. And it took me to really put myself out there, especially as a published author now, to know that imposter syndrome is pretty much I want to say like it's a predetermined box that somebody has put you in. As long as you understand what your goals are and you do nothing but go achieve it, you should never feel like you have imposter syndrome, because you're not imposing on anything. You're just working your butt off, trying the hardest to do something that you're passionate about, that you love. And if you're relentless about that, you will always find success.